And welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
Just like that, we're back and we're getting set for UFC Fight Night Holm versus Bueno Silva. One of those big time cards coming at you from the tiny UFC Apex. Everybody likes the Apex, Matt. It is one of those cards, a total of 13 fights, and you saw it in the intro. You're getting excited for next weekend. UFC London. Aspinall is back, and he's taking on Marcin Tybura. 15 total fights on that card coming up, so that's a little bit wild.
How surprised do you think Marcin Tybura was to open up that email of the Dana White in the UFC just asking him to main event? Because I gotta be honest, Marcin Tybura had a pretty good run, right? But it looked like that run was kind of over at a certain point, so it is very surprising to see him kind of be able to work his way back into this big opportunity. And we know about Tom Aspinall with his massive knee injury the last time out. That's a really big fight for the heavyweight division.
Are they sending Marcin in to clap those cheeks like Norma Dumont at weigh-ins?
I wouldn't have used any of those words in that order.
Fair enough, Matt, but there is a reason why we do the show on the Saturdays, and it's a chance to look back at the week that was and finally offer you up those picks, the previews, the predictions, and so on and so forth. And if you did look at it at the weigh-ins, I saw it up there earlier in the comments, kind of touching on the fact that Carl Deaton this, Bassil Hafez that. The craziest part about it that I found out of the weigh-ins was people had said, oh, well, Bassil, you see his cheekbones. You always see his cheekbones at weigh-ins. So nothing different there. Petition for Craig to bring back the Q&K parlay. Not going to happen to Murray Sims, but definitely appreciate the super chat nonetheless. But if you saw it for Bassil Hafez, and again, the reason why we do the show, first time weighs in at 171.5, and then he gets an hour to cut the extra half a pound, and he makes the weight successfully. So really good to see out of the short notice entrant in Bassil Hafez taking that fight very late notice at the start of this week. And for Jack Della Maddalena, weighed in 171 last Friday and then had to do it again and came in at 171. So awesome to see and a lot to talk about on this card, considering there are 13 total fights. You folks tuning in, it means the world to us. Thank you for the likes so far. Damari Sims hitting up that super chat, though I know the answer wasn't what you were looking for. We got First Last hanging out. We got Clay, JD, Nick Kaysen. Bueno Silva is a beast, and Marcus Mustard as well. Matt, we're going to throw it on over to a Fight of the Night screen, and lately you haven't been privy to these, but it's a couple of picks. I don't know why, yeah. It's a couple of picks where there's one of two fighters in both fights. So one half of both fights that recently picked up Fight of the Nights in their last times out. And for one half, well, they actually face each other. Evan Elder, Genaro Valdez. It's a wild fight. Valdez, his last time out against Natan Levy, bad first round. Good second round, bad third round. Evan Elder, good first two rounds, and then his eyebrow blew up. So I think this could be a really fun fight because Evan Elder tends to shell up and wait, and if he does, he could take some punishment from Valdez in this.
I agree that excitement-wise, this should be very high level. The only thing I might push back on a bit is I just don't know where I'd rank these guys, kind of where their ceilings are. You know, it's a little bit difficult to project an overly high ceiling for either guy. And in a fight of the night, it is nice to not only have two guys who you know are going to go out there and brawl, but you want to see that skill behind it too. And I just don't know if these guys do have that maybe high-level skill behind it, but I think it should result in a really fun fight because neither one's going to want to take that step back. They are both willing to eat a shot to give their own shot, and those are always the fun fights.
And I mean, you do have a My Fight of the Night from First Last. Alex Harris giving credit to Bassil Hafez, saying that he trains with Brandon Thatch and Alistair Overeem. That would have been cool 10 years ago. No, more than 10 years ago. It would have been cool to train with Brandon Thatch. But in 2023, I don't know if that's where you want to hang your hat. Matt, Nazim Sadikov, that's the reason why we had this as a possible fight tonight. Taking on Terrence McKinney. A fun fight. It's got everybody split on the end result. But going into it, I'm really excited about this one.
It should be a fun fight, and it really is a prove-it-to-me fight for Terrence McKinney. He got that big push when he first came to the UFC. We saw him get stopped his last time out. Quite brutal fashion, if we're being honest. So this fight against Sadikov is a big rebound for him. Because let's say he does get finished. I don't think he is going to get cut a la like Kevin Lee. You know, that guy just doesn't seem to get any opportunities. But for McKinney, he still does have that upside. So I think if he goes out there and puts on a good performance, and this fight just is one of those entertaining fights, it should be great for both guys' careers. Because this could be one of those, you hate to say it, but it could be one of those stock gaining fights no matter what the result is for both athletes. That's how good I think this fight could be.
Yeah, great opportunity for both these men. You know, Terrence McKinney, for all those early finishes that he has throughout his career, really good wrestling, really good striking defense, maybe not quite there. And for Sadikov, quick footwork and even quicker hands. So, Matt, I know we might not be as exciting as Daniela Helmsley or after her fights, but we will be that kind of exciting to try and get you pumped up for some of these fights. So, as you know, with question mark kicks, we start all the way at the bottom of the card and work our way back up to the top. You have the Rebel Girl, Ashlee Evans-Smith, taking on Ailin Perez. And a lot of people were surprised that I opened up our live show. Boy, do we ever go live for these fights at the start of the week, in saying that this fight sucks. And people were surprised that I said that. Why? Because Ashlee Evans-Smith hasn't won a fight in years. She's coming off a major back surgery. She's had plenty of injury woes. Her last time out, she didn't look at her best when she took on Norma Dumont, who's also on this card. And when you look at Ailin Perez, she dusted poor Argentinian regional competition. She had that loss in a fight that she was winning against Tamiris Vidal, who turns out she's a decent fighter. And then she had the win over Brakarak, which was a very older fighter, long in the tooth, somebody who had a loss to Caitlin Chukagian of all people. And Perez was able to go out there and do her thing. And she brought the fire and the fury against Stephanie Egger, but she couldn't figure out those scarf hold throws. She couldn't get out of some of the bad positions. She ended up getting finished on that short notice fight, up at 145 pounds. So natural weight class here, 135 for both of these women. Both of them made it successfully. But it really is. It's a clash of styles between these two.
I can simplify it very easily. Ashlee Evans-Smith is 36 years old and is 6-5 in her professional MMA career, right? Those are undisputable facts. If you are any athlete, well, any fighter at 36 with a record like that, it would be concerning, right? But with the time off and with the injuries, I'm very curious to see what version of her we're going to get.
Walt Harris is 13-10 with a no contest, 40 years old.
Perfect.
And most people had him to win.
A heavyweight in a division where heavyweights always do well. Great job. Yeah, Ashlee Evans-Smith is a fighter who's older, and even in her prime, I didn't look at Ashlee Evans-Smith like she was some borderline title challenger. I just think it is what it is. If she gets on top of Ailin Perez and can be that heavy dominant force and really use her physicality, she can have success. I still wouldn't compare her to a heavyweight Walt Harris, though. I have Ailin Perez in the matchup, but it will be interesting to see if Ashlee Evans-Smith can use that physicality because it is such a big part of her game.
And again, smaller fighter is Ailin Perez in the matchup, but she likes to try and close the distance quite a bit to get her work done. She will throw kicks from the outside, whereas Ashlee Evans-Smith in select fights is very kick heavy, but the majority of her work is done working the body, working the head with her boxing. So in this one, going with Ailin Perez, we have a look at the vote over on at Fight Night Picks. You can find us over there on Instagram. Our stories every single week, 80% going with Ailin Perez to get the win. We got Jonathan trying to get the clap back in the chat. We've got Looky Lou saying Ashlee Smith and her upside down crossing. Yeah, I mean, a little bit of ghost action over there. All right, Matt. Alexander Munoz taking on Carl Deaton III. Another bad fight. I mean, for Carl Deaton III, lost his UFC debut on short notice. 4 minutes and 55 seconds of the second round. He gets submitted by Joe Selecki. He got dominated for 4 minutes and 25 seconds and 4 minutes and 26 seconds, round 1 to round 2. So it was a pillar-to-post drubbing out of Joe Selecki, if we've ever seen one. For Alexander Munoz, lost his 2 fights in the UFC, Nasrat Haqparast, and then a chintzy split decision to Luis Pena. I mean, everybody was kind of split on that one. But regardless, when you look at a matchup like this, Munoz coming off of a major layoff of about 2 years, major injuries, ACL, and so on. Still teaching, still learning. A Team Alpha Male as a wrestling coach, but it's a tricky fight based on the experience, the level of activity of a guy like Carl Deaton, and he's just tricky, he is.
I'm just curious to see how long Munoz can use some of those top positions, because I think he can take Deaton III down to the mat, like there's no doubt in my mind he can, but it's how long can he control him in some of those positions, because Joe Selecki is a grappler, but he's not the same kind of grappler Munoz is. He's going to want to hold you in some of those positions and really sap your strength from that top position once it does hit the mat, whereas Munoz is going to pick you up, take you down, and rinse and repeat. He's going to be able to do it many more times, but I'm curious to see how heavy he can stay on top, because if he is not unstable, but just he finds himself getting bucked off and has to waste a lot of his energy getting more of those mat returns and additional takedowns. That's going to hurt his game that much more as it goes down the stretch, I believe. But it is going to come down to, can Deaton bust him up on the feet and really avoid just being held down?
I got to be completely honest. There's a few on this. There's 13 total fights. They're all pretty low level. But when it comes down to this one, I can see Carl Deaton getting the win, half the time, if I can put it that way. Because for Deaton...
Isn't that any fight you can win half the time?
No. Deaton has much more avenues to get a win in this one.
For
He's
sure.
a better striker out of the two. He's really tricky in a lot of the grappling positions. He's got really good chokes at his disposal, whereas Munoz has... I'm going to feint the big overhand to try and take you down, and if he can't hold you down, he tires himself out. Again, both guys the same age. Munoz with that layoff. I do have Munoz in the fight, but as Looky Lou's saying, CD3 getting cut off a loss. Yeah, I think either guy with a loss. You get Munoz, who's 33 off of 3 losses. That's probably it. And even Deaton coming in on short notice, doing everybody a favor to fight Selecki's last time out. That's probably it as well.
And we both have Munoz, but you do bring up the very important point. At 33 years old with his kind of a fighting style, unless we see some massive new improvement put onto his game during this fight, it is going to be difficult to see him really working his way up this division, starting to fight some of the more elite guys. But it should be an interesting fight for both of them, because at least this is what we can say. This is a well-matched fight between these two. They are both occupying a very similar space in the division. It's not like we have Alexander Munoz fighting Dan Hooker all of a sudden or anything wild like that.
No, we'll see if Chris Holdsworth can really help out in the camp of Alexander Munoz, a name from the past. TJ Dillashaw, why'd you do it? Matt Tyson take it on. Azat Maksum, and we touched on this fight quite a bit at the start of the week because for Tyson Nam, very good wrestling defense. Now, numbers on a page, the 100% takedown defense in the UFC, it doesn't really do it justice because it's only 5 takedowns. He's defending them all, that's great, but that was what Tyson Nam was known for on the regional scene. His speed, his footwork, his power without the volume. It's a really funky style when you really do look back at it. So when you look at a guy like Tyson Nam taking on a guy like Azat Maksum, Nam is there to land the counter shot all day. He's kind of predicated entire career on that at age 40. And Azat Maksum has poor striking defense, good wrestling, and really wonky volume when Maksum decides to utilize it. So I'll be eager to see how both these men make out in this fight. I think flyweight really does have something, not just with Tyson Nam at 40, coming off a few losses, but for Azat Maksum, or just the one loss against Bueno Silva, he'd finished Ode Osborne before that. An Ode Osborne card, how could you go wrong? But for Azat Maksum, I know he's the hot, new, shiny toy that's out there out of Kazakhstan, undefeated, and the fans are really liking him.
And it should be a really interesting matchup. This is a debut that I think everybody can get behind because, like you said, we know what Tyson Nam does well, we know what he doesn't do well, and at this stage of his career, you hate to say it, but this is what the UFC is going to do with him, right? They're going to keep on bringing in people, either making their debut or they're a hot prospect, and hey, you get to fight Tyson Nam next. And the curious thing that I have about this fight is, I think the first round is going to be a bit stale, if I'm being completely honest. I do think we are going to see Nam on the back foot quite a bit, and I do think Azat's going to be conscious of the power coming back his way, to where he's not going to open up his game all that much. Now, if he can back up Tyson Nam to the cage and start using his wrestling from there, then I'm going to be wrong and we're probably going to see a lot more exchanges from that position. But still, I think on the feet, Azat is going to be at least a little bit tentative early on before he can settle his way into the fight, because it's pretty bad for your career if you get knocked out by a 40-year-old Tyson Nam in your debut. But if you can go out there, if he can use his wrestling to start opening up the threat of his own strikes, we talked about it at the start of the week, he has a very powerful overhand himself, and I don't think he's going to outstrike Tyson Nam for long portions of the fight, but I do think he's going to be able to have success on the feet nonetheless.
And I think we'll see a lot of the grappling out of Azat Maksum in his fight. If you guys want to go back and watch tape, it's really easy. It's all out there on YouTube. But if you want to see his fight against Michael Al-Jarui, that's a really, really good one. Back and forth action. Maksum gets a knockdown, struggles with some of the takedowns. Maksum's been dropped in the past too, so don't let the 16-0 fool you, but this should be a really fun fight. 74% of the fans going with Kazakhstan's Maksum.
And if the thing I like about Azat, though, you're right, he has been put in bad situations on the regional scene. But he does do a good job of fighting out of them, I must say. He is someone who, when he gets hurt, he'll go into takedowns. He does scramble. He's not just going to get into those classic hold-down positions. That's what I do like out of him. But it's going to be really curious to see. If you're getting hurt on the regional scene, now you're fighting Tyson Nam and you get hit by big shots, you can start to panic very fast in situations like
Tyson Nam hits very hard. Azat Maksum open to minus 400. He's a minus 423 right now, so that one's tricky. Jonathan doesn't like the Ode Osborne win. Many have tried. Some have succeeded. The ones that succeed usually do pretty well.
It's not like Artem Lobov levels, though, where 29 have tried and 15 have succeeded.
I mean, Bitterbeef, he got it done. Elvin Elder's taking on Genaro Valdez. Now, I didn't say very nice things about Genaro Valdez when he made his UFC debut against Matt Frivola pre-fight. I thought that Genaro was one of the the trickier fighters to come into the UFC, and I didn't see a long future. Now we're in fight number 3, and he's lost 2. So, good opportunity, I guess, against Evan Elder. And for Elder, there are some of the same things that you can kind of punch the holes in the record coming into the UFC. It wasn't the greatest level competition. It was kind of one of those things where, well, you lasted against Preston Parsons for quite a while. That's pretty good. And he was on his way to beating Nazim Sadikov, who's further up this card. All 3 judges, 20 to 18. So doing really well against Sadikov. He would have won that fight if he didn't take a big shot and his eyebrow blew up, and it was a nastier thing. Now, it wasn't as bad as the KSW 3 in Buddy's
It was still a gross cut.
Buddy's head there today, but if you look at it for Evan Elder, he definitely showed in a loss his last time out. And for Renato Valdez, he showed that he'd get dropped twice in the first round, rally back in the second round, and get out-wrestled
Craig
in the
has
third
Evan
round
Elder, as you guys can tell.
against Natan Levy. Renato's one of those guys that's going to bring the storm at you. You saw him on the regional scene when he was fighting with Lux. He'd pressure forward, he'd blitz you, and if he dropped you, then he'd try and sink in the submission or finish you with ground and pound. He's very much finish over position, and that's why you see a lot of first-round finishes there for Valdez. I like the more well-rounded Evan Elder in the matchup at a kill clip, but this is a tricky one when you got 2 finishing artists.
I think Elder has more variety to his strikes on the feet, but I do think that big flurry out of Valdez can be really difficult for him to deal with, because in his last matchup, that's when he was having... it was a great fight going back and forth. That's just one of those great Contender Series fights, but when he was getting backed up, he wasn't nearly the same fighter as he was when he was the one initiating some of those engagements. So for Valdez, I do think the opening moments are going to give him opportunity to win. He does have big hooks when he is able to close the distance. He's going to shoot for... Now, they're takedowns. I'm not going to say they're the greatest takedowns of all time. He will get caught up against the cage going for more sequences after that. But again, that rush, that flurry, it does make you think on the tips of your toes. And if Evan Elder does make any one singular mistake with his back up against the cage, he could find himself being hit by some of those bigger shots. But with his variety in his strikes, and I do think he's going to be able to fight within the same version of himself longer in the fight. I don't know if Valdez can be able to keep that wild man kind of style going for a solid 15 minutes.
Chris Kazenza Skate saying, you guys are the best. Appreciate you. Thanks, Fight Night Picks. I appreciate you as well. Thank you for tuning in. And when you consider this fight, Matt, the fan vote at Fight Night Picks is very close. 57% going with Elder to the 43% that have Renato Valdez. So tricky fight for sure. I'm going to go with Elder in the matchup. We're in agreement on that one. And then we move forward into Lingo versus Costa. And Matt, the fans like Austin Lingo this week, and I mean, how could you not? You like his boxing, you like his forward pressure. He's one of those guys that I feel like Terminator style, like you can knock him down a dozen times in a fight and he'd spring right back.
I thought this was going to be on the Fight of the Night screen, if I'm being completely honest. This, for me at least, is one of those Fight of the Nights, and I said it a lot at the start of the week, and I'm going to go back to this point and really hammer it home. The reason I like Costa in the matchup isn't just because he throws kicks. He throws that left high kick. What does Austin Lingo love to throw? That right hand. And what the left high kick does make you do is, it doesn't allow you to throw the right hand as liberally out there. So you're just, hey, power shots, winging them. It does make you at least be conscientious of your defense by holding that hand up. And I just think that one little niche in Costa's game is going to be enough not to make Austin Lingo fight like a completely different fighter, but at least make him hesitate that half a second more before he starts to go forward with his own strikes. And that's why I like Costa in the matchup. But for me, this is an incredible fight. I love the pressure of Lingo, and I really like the questions it's going to pose for a guy like Costa and how he's going to decipher that pressure.
Well, I mean, Matthew in the comments, not Matthew next to me, saying, Lingo got destroyed his last fight. Yeah, but he came back after over a year and a half away to fight a guy that got a win to then fight a ranked fighter. Like, that wasn't an easy fight for Lingo, and he was originally getting ready for Ricardo Ramos, who, although his UFC career progressed at Team Alpha Male and then regressed when he went back to Brazil, he got a lot better at the grappling, but the striking is what got Ricardo Ramos to the game, and that's probably what Lingo was getting ready. He was forced to strike and then grapple against one Nate the Train Landwehr, and then he got finished on the ground, so I don't look too much into that. However, when it comes to this fight, relatively full camp for both these guys. Costa's a guy that's going to try and take it down to the mat. Costa's a guy with the jiu-jitsu. He's a guy that tends to throw the kicks when it is on the feet. I do like Mal Costa in the matchup. The fans on this one at Fight Night pick 65%. Going with the Milkman to get the win. The boxing prophet. Does Austin Lights Out Lingo have knockouts? Does he have knockouts?
He does.
I mean, can Mookie Betts hit? Yeah, Austin Lingo's got some knockouts. Matt, our next matchup is Tella Nunes taking on Victoria Dudakova. A lot of strong feelings on this fight by the fans out there in the comments this week. You have the grappling, and Listen, I mean, I know I said about Genaro Valdez, he liked to blitz forward, drop his opponent, finish them on the ground. Victoria Dudakova and most of her regional scene fights did just that. It was against a bad level of competition for both of them. So for Victoria Dudakova, big underdog on Dana White's Contender Series last summer, outlasted Maria Silva, 29-28s that were out there. And if you look at it for Dudakova's second round, that knee went wonky. She obviously had the pictures where she had the Stone Cold Steve Austin brace on for a while, but she's back. So awesome to see you for Dudakova. Taking on the striking specialist, the former world Muay Thai champ, Estela Nunes, who got a title shot with one championship years and years ago against Angela Lee and got submitted in that one. So for Nunes, she got a win after that, and then she ended up in the UFC a few years later after some USADA complications. And Nunes has had her moments in the 3 losses in the UFC. Not really. Well, against Sam Hughes, she would have won that fight if there wasn't an eye poke. She dropped Yasmin Jauregui, and then she got dropped after that. And in the debut, it was kind of 50-50 when she was taking on Carnelossi. She got finished at the end of that fight. So it's a tricky fight for sure. And Matt, Prince Vegeta's son saying she has CM Punk's MMA record. Did you see me outside mowing the lawn? Answer?
Yes, I did.
Did you see what shirt I was wearing?
No, I was cooking an early supper.
I was wearing the CM Punk $5 UFC shirt as I mowed the lawn. So if any of the neighbors saw me, they probably went, hey, that's a cool guy.
A big chick magnet fan.
That's a cool guy. When you're making a pick on this one, I know we're split at the start of the week, but what do you have to say about the fight?
I'm Dudakova because of her grappling, but I do think Nunes can go out there and at least make it interesting on the feet with some of her power shots. The thing that is holding me back from picking Nunes, though, is I just don't know how sustainable that striking is going to be, because if she is defending takedowns, if she is at least in a lot of these exchanges to where her arms are burning out, well, I don't think the power is going to last for 15 minutes. She isn't like a Walt Harris or like Tom Aspinall, who we'll be talking about next week. So I think for Nunes, she's going to have to really make use of some of her shots and be squirrely on the mat. Don't just allow Dudakova to get into some of those set positions and start to threaten.
She's real bad when she gets her back
to
the mat.
That's what I do worry about for Nunes. Again, I think that there are areas where she can have success. I just think that area is so narrow that it's going to be really difficult for her to go out there and get a decision.
For me, I think it's the footwork, the speed, and the power of Nunes, and that's why I went with her at the start of the week. It would not surprise me one bit. 56% of the fans going Dudakova, so what was it, like 7% had Nunes at the start of the week? I have Estela Nunes with the striking on this one, but a tricky fight for sure. Boxing Prophet asking about boxing fans, but throw me a bone here. And there, someone asked a question, kindly answer, please and thanks. All right, we'll throw a question out there if you'd like. Nunes lost to Hughes 29-27. The eye pokes didn't matter. Watch the fight and look at the scorecards. It was a majority decision win, and if there was no eye poke, Estela Nunes would have won that fight. All right,
would it have been a draw?
You have a look at Tucker Lutz taking on Melzik Bogdasarian. I'll go back to it just to prove the point. Lutz taking on Bogdasarian. This is another one where the fans were pretty split on it, because for Tucker Lutz, we expected great things against Daniel Pineda. Obviously, we knew that he was off due to injuries, and Bogdasarian also working his way back from injuries. He was having a great time out against Josh Kulibau, slipped on a kick, got submitted. So those are always those interesting fights to watch. But when you consider this one, can you kind of side with the fans that are all over the place on it?
I think this has the potential to be a really fun fight, and we brought up a lot at the start of the week just how important range is going to be in this matchup, because for Lutz, when he's able to get on the inside and really implement his own power shots, he's a very difficult athlete to deal with. And with Bogdasarian, he's definitely the more kick-heavy out of these two, and if Lutz can just eliminate those kicks, not that it just makes it a boxing match, but it's going to make it a lot more manageable for Lutz once it is on the feet. Now, if Tucker's able to threaten with the takedowns too, it's just going to open up the striking that much more, but I did side with Bogdasarian at the start of the week, and my pick still is with Melzik, because I just think he has that much more variety on the feet that he can throw. Now, I worry about Lutz if he can hurt Bogdasarian with some of those bigger shots, because that is going to make him a little bit more hesitant himself, but if he can throw some of those up the middle attacks that we often talk about, like how Cowboy Cerrone did against Eddie Alvarez so famously, those knees at the middle I think are going to be there for him as Lutz closes the distance, but it comes down to, can he meet Tucker Lutz when he comes in and not delay some of those attacks? Because if he is a half a second late, well then he's going to have to start defending takedowns and worry about those shots, and that's when the fight gets that much more difficult.
Hughes would have won the fight regardless, but it was an oddball one. To go there, there's a few talks about the Jays. Matt, okay, Blue Jays, let's play ball. I'm looking forward to seeing Juan Soto next week there. That'll be fun. When it does come down to this one, Like, again, I do see a lot of people over there talking about Melzik Bogdasarian. Lord Nikon saying Melzik is a high ceiling, low floor type of fighter.
Good way of describing it.
Yeah, but his grappling's not all that great. Even though it was off a slip his last time out.
His striking is good enough to where, okay, if he can keep the fight on the feet, I do think his ceiling is a decent level, but that's why he says the floor is also low. The holes are there in the game. That's exactly what he's saying.
He doesn't have the greatest of volume. You know that the power is there. And for Tucker Lutz, I mean, it's a combination of the striking and the grappling. And if he brings the grappling shoes in this one, there's definitely a way that Lutz can get the win. I wouldn't be surprised if the votes are close on this one at Fight Night Picks. And there's 70% for Melzik Bogdasarian. So for me, I'm going to go with Melzik. But yeah, it's a tricky fight on the prelims here.
It is, but it should be a fun one. And again, I brought it up at the start of the week. This might not be the most high-profile card, right? These aren't a bunch of ranked fighters who are getting ready for title shots. But the good thing about this card is there's a lot of pretty even matchups. And normally when you have a lot of even matchups and guys aren't really outclassing each other, it's going to result in really fun fights. So that's all I'm hoping for.
I mean, we got to see it. We got to believe it. We got to see it in this matchup, Matt. Terrence McKinney, forever the favorite, forever the darling with the fans. Put me on a pay-per-view card. I'm Terrence McKinney.
I think you think a lot higher of Terrence McKinney's star power. No, I know you say this, but like people on Twitter aren't still singing this guy's praises.
People on YouTube are.
Okay, but I'm just saying, like Terrence McKinney is not still that same level. You have gone every time we do a Terrence McKinney, you bring up how viral he is and stuff. He has not had this level in a while.
Matt, if people watch the videos and there's a lot of engagement on McKinney videos, I'd say the fans like Terrence McKinney.
Terrence McKinney's not some guy who's going out there and people think he's getting ready to fight for the rankings anytime soon. Like, he has a lot of work to do, and I think people realize that. Yes, he got a big push initially, but I do think people have really tapered their expectations and they know what to realize with him. That's all.
Well, we'll see how it goes, because when you do consider a matchup like this, better wrestler out of the two, it's a man on the left-hand side. Who's got more power? That's kind of tough right there. Who's got the more varied attacks? Probably the guy on the left-hand side. A little bit unorthodox. A lot of fun. You like to see it.
I still think Sadikov would have more.
For Nazem Sadikov, though, you do like to see it's the stance switches, the foot speed, the hand speed. He's in, he's out, and that's it. And his last time out, he was losing both rounds against Evan Elder, only to pull a rabbit out of the hat, and he gets the win in the third. If you watch Sadikov fights, you know how good he can be, and you know the potential. And already at 8-1, they're putting him up against somebody who's had a lot of push by the promotion. So good to see it of both these guys. And I know I mentioned at the start of the week, Sadikov even coming off Contender Series, they sent him over there to Azerbaijan, and they made a video series out of it. So pretty good to see both of these two guys. But when you consider a matchup like this between both of these guys, if McKinney decided to go to the well with his wrestling like he started to do against Sean Woodson, you could see some success there for him. I don't necessarily, and I think Sadikov's got the same type of shot that Bonfim did the last time he was out there, even though at the start, McKinney, he burned hot, and he looked pretty good when he did.
I personally think Bonfim's better than Sadikov. Now, I don't know that for a fact.
And it doesn't look as good after the other weekend,
no,
but
exactly.
I agree with you.
I'm just saying, personally, I do think a little bit higher of Bonfim. So I'm not just saying, oh, if Bonfim can do it, anybody can. The only thing that worries me about Sadikov in this matchup, I think most of his A-tier skills, if you will, do counter what McKinney does, right? He has the good footwork. He can strike with power from both sides. He'll throw a nice left hook and a right one, too. The thing about Sadikov, though, is sometimes he will forget the footwork and just put his hands up. And that's when he can get into trouble. When he is meshing in the footwork with his striking defense, he does a great job of getting in and then getting out before his opponent can counter. But if his opponent's the one who's pushing forward, he will have a tendency sometimes to just put his hands up and wait for those first couple of shots. And against a guy like McKinney, exactly. If McKinney gets his own back up against the cage, you might find this odd. Normally the aggressive fighter's the one having the most success. I could honestly see a situation where McKinney has his own back up against the cage, Sadikov's the one walking him down, and Nazem does at least stay in the pocket for that half second too long to where he can get countered. Even with all that being said, I just think his variety on the feet and with his footwork when it is all working together, it's just a little bit too much for McKinney to get over.
55% of the fans at Fight Night Picks on Instagram have McKinney to get the win in the matchup. I do like Nazem Sadikov in this fight, but it should be a fun one. Alex Fox saying Frivola and Aljo Nazim's corner, and you see those two guys featured heavily on the Instagram of Sadikov, training out of Longo and Weidman MMA. Harry Connick likes a freaking lasagna. I can't wait to see Ray Longo. Matt, Albert Duraev taking on Jin Young Park. And a lot of people, when this was the co-main event of the card, said it was awful. It's the worst co-main event in the history of the UFC.
Been a lot of bad ones.
Yeah, I mean, Jake Collier fought Chase Sherman last year in a co-main event. Caio Bahalio fought Gaji Omar Gadriev in a co-main event a few months after that.
Who was buddy who fought Greg Hardy who looked like he didn't even want to be in there? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That
and
was
I
on the
can picture
poster.
his-
I can't think of
I
his
can
name,
picture
though.
his
It's just,
face.
there's been some awful co-main events. It's kind of like the
He's-
number 2 pick in the NBA draft. Sam Bowie was the number 2
Dmitry
pick.
Smolyakov.
There you go. Like, you don't want to be the number 2 pick. You don't want to be the co-main event all the time. But I will say this. I actually think this is going to be a fun fight. Not because either guy is getting ready to fight, Israel Adesanya or Dricus du Plessis or anything, but Albert Duraev has a fun game to watch, right? You realize he can get tired as the fight goes on. He's got a great top game, though. He's going to wing some power shots and eat some power shots as a result. Those are all things people like to watch. And for Jin Young Park, I do think his pressure is going to be very key in this matchup, because if he's the one retreating, that is going to make the takedown of Duraev a little bit easier. Not that I think taking down the Iron Turtle is easy by any means, but I just think my big X factor for Duraev and why I picked him in this matchup is I think he is going to be able to get those takedowns. And yes, I worry about his cardio and whether or not that's a sustainable game plan, but if he doesn't have to work a lot after he is able to get the takedown to where he doesn't have to burn a ton of energy going like 2 for 13, some of those ridiculous numbers we'll see in some fights, then I do think Duraev does have all the tools to go out there and get the win.
I don't know if anybody ever saw the Saturday Night Live skit. I know you did because I'm a big Tim Robinson fan, but the one that he did with Jason Sudeikis where they were at the NBC studios with Vince Vaughn and they come up with the song basketball, gimme the ball because I'm going to dunk it. And when they decide that they're not going to sign on the brother to sing it, he pulls out a tiny little hammer and he starts smashing stuff. Albert Duraev sometimes pulls the tiny little hammers out and he just starts smashing stuff. And then when it doesn't go well, I mean, they pass on his song. And when you look at Albert Duraev in the UFC, he's 2-1. And if you consider the 2 first fights that he had in the UFC, left eye, pop ball, left eye, pop ball, last time out, left eye, cut up, but not a pop ball. And he got the win his last time against Chidi and Njokuani. It was a chintzy win. Regardless, you look at this fight, I mean, for Duraev, you know how good of a grappler he is. And I don't just say a wrestler because he brings it all together. His top pressure is amazing. His ground and pound's great. If he can soften you up, he can choke you out at the same time. And again, Duraev fought nothing but good fighters all the way up through his career when he was overseas. He was the ACB welterweight and then middleweight champ. He gets that win on Contender Series. He's off to the races. For Jin Young Park, already 6-2 in the UFC. We've talked hand speed extensively today. Sometimes Park sticks around in the pocket a little bit too long. You saw him get caught against Gregory Rodriguez in that matchup. Park, when he can work in his grappling, he is the hammer. But when he's the nail, he's usually not the better grappler in this. Now, I don't think Duraev is as quick and as slick as a guy like Fluffy Hernandez. And even in the Park fight against Eric Anders, that's where it kind of gets interesting. Because who would you pick? Eric Anders or Albert Duraev? Honest
Probably
to goodness,
Duraev right now.
well, it's tough. But
Eric Anders is
when
bad.
we're making a pick on this one, I think Park is one of those guys that just has more avenues in this fight. So I will go with Jin Young Park in the matchup. Matt, if we have a look at Fight Night picks for the total votes on this one,
gotta be close.
60% going with Duraev in the matchup, and that just is a tricky fight. Now, I'm going to have to add it in after the fact. Old Norma Dumont's taking on Chelsea Chandler on this card, but we'll go to the next matchup, and then we'll add it in afterwards. Matt, Ottman Azaitzar taking on Francisco Prado. Matt, people like Francisco Prado. They think he's all that in a bag of chips. He's got a very complete game plan. He goes balls to the wall. And for Ottman Azaitzar, he was good a few years ago. And then Potato Gate happened and he looked really bad against Matt Frivola, who's now ranked. So Matt, when you look at this fight, both guys with finishing abilities up near the top of the card.
Exactly. I just don't really know where I place Ottman Azaitzar in the whole division. He could be a top 45 fighter. He could be top 20 fighter. Like, I just don't really know where the ultimate Ottman route is, because that loss to Matt Frivola was a bad loss. And I understand Matt Frivola kind of went under that like power resurgence at one point, but I still don't think Matt Frivola is the best boxer in the UFC by any means. So for Ottman, you can't forget about how aggressive he was on the regional scene, how many finishes he was getting, how great his own striking did look. But I talked about it at the start of the week, and I gotta keep on talking about it because Ottman's one of these guys who his last loss was so bad. I almost try to not overcorrect it in my mind, but the second that gets brought up, I really don't know what my overall opinion is going to be in this matchup. I think it's going to be a great fight between them. But for Prado, he can't look as flat, I guess, is kind of what I'm looking for. Jimmy Mullarkey's a very skilled fighter. I think everybody knows that. But he did seem a step behind in that matchup, and he was never really able to get his footing after that first round. Jimmy Mullarkey took him down, had the jab in his face, and was really making Prado think a lot. So maybe it's the same situation for him, too. It was kind of one of those buy low on both guys in their last matchup, and maybe this could be a fight of the night caliber fight when it's all said and done.
Well, like, it was a short notice fight for Prado to debut against Mullarkey. He was flying across the world. He was training in South America. Now Prado based out of a big gym, Kill Cliff. Whereas, I mean, you have Ottman Azaitzar out of a smaller gym in Morocco.
Yeah.
And those brothers, I mean, they made it to the UFC, and it was something. You know what they're training with right now? We talked about the fight before the camera started to roll. Joel Alvarez sought out the training with Otman Azaitsar in Morocco. Yikes. And Joel Alvarez, if you didn't know, fights Mark Chikasi next weekend. So in this matchup, it's tricky. I think we picked like a weird pick in Otman Azaitsar.
Yeah.
But I will go with Azaitsar. Sean V says, Azaitsar sucks.
And if he gets knocked out, listen, you can find me on Twitter and say it all you want.
Yeah, I mean, Prado, more methods of victory in this fight. The grappling, the jiu-jitsu, the striking, it's all on point when it is on point. But I've seen him get dropped against like a blown-up bantamweight. So it's a tricky one for sure. Both of us going as Azaitsar. All right, so now we got to bring up, for some reason it won't pop up. There we go. Norma Dumont. Norma Dumont's fighting Chelsea Chandler.
Wait, before we get into, do you think Ronda Rousey is coming back?
No, it was the
No,
rumors
I know. I'm
dispelled.
just saying.
However, one of the coaches that's coaching in the UFC this weekend in the corner, Melzik Bogdasarian, Edmund Tarverdian, posted on his Twitter, she's coming back.
I just wanted
I
to,
don't think
because
so.
when I initially saw that, I was like, I wonder if she ever would. You know, I didn't put a lot of thought into it. It's just, when Ronda was done with MMA, she was one of those people that I just assumed was done with MMA. But this is a weird fight, because we talked about it.
Clash of styles.
What do you get, though, for winning at 145? And at least if Ronda Rousey was out there, that is some kind of thing that you can work towards, right? You can build up the division around Ronda, and you can at least make that the light at the end of the tunnel. I am a little bit curious, though, to see if Chelsea Chandler is going to be able to have just the grappling that we have seen in the past against somebody like Norma Dumont, because Dumont is just an odd fighter, right? We saw her get knocked out by Megan Anderson. I just can't stop bringing that up because Norma herself is such a talented striker that was kind of a difficult loss for her to take, but she's not fighting a striker of that caliber in this matchup at all.
Chelsea Chandler is a lot more like Albert Duraev than Megan Anderson striking, because Chandler just walks forward, throws her arms out there, her head's right there in the center line. If she can get the takedowns, it's great, and you saw that with Invicta and throughout her career. In the fight against Stolyarenko, it was weird because Stolyarenko gets the first takedown. She initiates the second one and almost pulls Chandler onto her. And then in the third one, it's the same thing. And then Chandler ends up getting the win out of it. So for me, I mean, Dugan really throwing us the bone out there. If you could toss us a like, Matt. 430 tuning in on a slow Saturday for a home Bueno Silva card. I do like Norma Dumont in the fight. I think she can do more with some of the striking. But for Chelsea Chandler, if she goes in with the blueprint of look at exactly what Macy Chasson did well in a boring fight, then that could be a win for her. So for me, I'm going to go with Dumont, but this fight is tricky. And if Chandler won, I don't think it would surprise anybody.
No, I have Dumont in the matchup. But again, if Chandler wins, this isn't as high profile a win as some other ones, but this is a bigger win than just an average one, I think, because Dumont has been in the main event in the past.
Matt, they're both ranked bantamweights.
But you know what I mean? Like, Norma Dumont's someone who, again, I talked about it before. She got like a weird push by the UFC, and a lot of it did come down to who her opponents were in those matchups, but still, Norma Dumont has been in high profile fights, so a win over her isn't like a win over, you know, like a Jim Miller or Robbie Lawler, but it's still a good win to have on your resume.
The pits, they're leaking. But Matt, we move forward and we have a look at our next matchup. It's Della versus Bassil Hafez. And Matt, again, Jack Della making the weight 2 weeks in a row, Friday to Friday, 175. 171 in that span. And he's taking on Bassil Hafez. And Matt, this is a picture of Bassil at his last weigh-in before he weighed in the UFC. He looks the same.
Well, if it's his last weigh-in, wouldn't he still be drained?
What do you mean? Yeah, he'd be drained the last time he weighed in before he had to weigh in the UFC.
Well, okay, that's what I mean. So you're also showing a drained picture of him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he doesn't...
A lot of people thought that Bassil looked terrible weighing in on the scales. Now, it took him 2 times, 171 and a half, 171 his next time out. But a good win there for Bassil Hafez, who strikes and strikes hard, beat the New Brunswick man for the CFFC belt, beat Christian Savoy. And if you look at it for Bassil Hafez, throws hammers to close the distance. He'll switch over to southpaw to throw that big right hook, but then he squares his feet. And that could really be a chance for Della to counter. Della struggled on the regional scene with the grappling. Bassil Hafez out of Colorado. We've seen him in 5-round fights. We've seen him use the takedowns. We've seen him really neutralize a lot of fighters out there. And I point to his draw that he had against Jeremiah Wells. It was 29-28, 29-28, 29-28. Somehow a draw. He really did well in that matchup. And the first 2 rounds were close enough. And you could even say Hafez won the first 2, lost the third. But all that to say, Hafez could ground out Jack Della, surprising people, and I know that's crazy to say based on the fact that
I don't think he will. I'm just
Della's looked really good as he's gone up through. He's dusted a lot of fighters. He got out of that tricky front choke from Ramazan Amif. He got out of a really bad position against him as well. So again,
he got taken down and then got up immediately. Like, Jack Della Maddalena in the past has, yes, but Ramazan Amif took him down, and he got up almost immediately after. Like, there was not a long exchange on the mat. There wasn't a time where he got his back down. Like, I do think his takedown defense and his scramble ability has improved tremendously since the regional scene. I go back to what I always say. It's really difficult to beat anybody on short notice. It's way harder to beat people on short notice when they're a ranked fighter. And for Jack Della Maddalena, he might not have the resume of some of the other ranked fighters in the welterweight division, you know, where he's fought everybody who's ranked, like a Neil Magny perhaps, but I just think fighting him on short notice is such a difficult task. You're right, Hafez does have some of those skills from that long distance with his own hooks, but Della Maddalena is somebody who isn't going to play that game to begin with. He doesn't throw a ton of kicks himself. He's going to get right on the inside and start to use his own boxing, and I think that boxing range is going to help neutralize a lot.
I think it's so disrespectful to put down the fighter making the debut just because he's taking on a guy who's ranked. I mean, take Jack Della out of the equation. Bassil Hafez is a really good fighter.
I wouldn't ever pick somebody on short notice against a ranked fighter in the UFC.
You never do.
No, well, yeah, for good reason. You know why? Because on short notice, when you're not in the organization, you're not getting ready for a fight like the other guy is, who has the body of work to support his position in the division. Why would I?
Trains at an awesome gym. He's got a great shot in this one. All of that can be true, Craig.
But again, a guy on short notice who has never been on this stage before, it's pretty difficult for him to come in and beat a guy who's looked so good.
Well, he's definitely got a great shot in this one. And then it comes the main event. Bueno Silva won on Contender Series at 135. Had some fights at 125. She was able to get a win over Jillian Robertson when it really meant something in that flyweight division. And if you look at it for Bueno Silva, thriving at 135. And her last time out, beats Lena Landsberg, the old elbow queen, who, I mean, just had a tricky run at the end, I guess we could say. Also lost to Penny Kanza, who fights next weekend. But when you look at a matchup like this, Matt, for Bueno Silva, I mean, 10-year age gap. She's got that 3-fight win streak. She's got some performance bonuses of late. The Wu Yanan fight of the night. That's not good when you're fighting Holly Holm, though. A win over Landsberg is definitely good. But when you consider a fight like this, Matt, I mean, for Holm, she's really turned away a lot of top prospects. The Ketlin Vieira fight was obviously 50-50 to the tune of a split decision, where there were plenty of people that thought that Holm had won. But if you look at her late career, it's still the set combinations. It's still the wall install, and we'll see if that can work against Bueno Silva.
Yeah, if Holly Holm wins this fight, it's not going to be the most aesthetically pleasing. We're not going to get like Jalen Turner versus Dan Hooker in this matchup. Now, if Bueno Silva can get the fight to the mat, that's a big ask, right? Because Holly Holm is not somebody who grew up with a base of grappling, but her MMA grappling has reached a pretty good level. The Megan Anderson fight, I can't believe I brought up Megan Anderson twice on this video. The Megan Anderson fight was really the one where Holly showed a lot of those offensive games. She went for a single leg quite a bit in that fight, and even if she wasn't able to get the initial takedown, she would grapple quite a bit even off of her back if Megan Anderson was able to get on top. And I think that those skills at least show the prerequisite for how to fight someone like Bueno Silva if you have the striking of a Holly Holm, because Silva is not some bad fighter on the feet by any means, but I think the range against a fighter like Holm, who is so big for this division, is going to be really difficult for her to overcome. And on the flip side, if Bueno Silva can land a lot of volume, maybe that can outweigh some of the cage control of a Holly Holm and at least make this fight close in a round by round basis, but I still think Holly Holm's going to be in more of those dominant positions.
And Bueno Silva has a Thai stance, likes to box quite a bit. She's not the biggest kicker, and against a boxing Hall of Famer, it's tough, but for Holly Holm, kind of like a Robert Whittaker, it's always those set combinations every single time out. Troy Hall mentioning Stephen Airse getting that airplay beating David Dvorak.
I'm sorry. Anybody can bring up one exception about a rule. Anybody can. One exception doesn't mean you're right, though.
Alexander Hernandez.
Exactly. Okay. And you mean the ones I brought up at the start of the week? I know, Craig. It does happen. You know why I can't think of any examples? Because it happens so often. Unranked fighters on short notice from other organizations who have never fought in the UFC don't beat ranked fighters often, guys. Come on.
We'll see if it happens. Matt, 63% of the fans here going with Holly Holm to get the win. I do have Holm in this matchup, but
where does Holm go from here, though? Like, for your Holly Holm, she's kind of reached the Neil Magny point, right?
To Jackson Wink, takes 9 months off, and then gets another main event that nobody cares about.
But that's kind of my whole point. That's all. It's just for Holly Holm, she has reached the stage of her career where it feels like it's kind of title shot or bust, right? Like, that's all Holly Holm's working towards. But with, I guess, Amanda still, who knows? I just don't really know where Holly Holm goes from here. That's all. It's a very odd portion of her career because the UFC is trying to build all these people off of her, but she is going out there and getting a lot of wins.
I mean, maybe they'll do Jermaine Durandamy, Holly Holm for the featherweight belt again.
Maybe
it'll Jermaine Durandamy, the comeback. All right, Matt. Both of us going with Holm. As you know, with Fight Night Picks question mark kicks, you got to let us know. I mean, toss us a like. Tell us who you got. We'll rip through this card one more time. The first fight, Evan Smith, Perez. I guess I'll go with Perez.
I've got Perez too.
All right, next one. Dugan, you're too kind. Alex Munoz taking on Carl Deaton III. This is a really tricky one. I guess I have Munoz.
I have Munoz as well, but I'll be curious to see if he's added anything to his game.
Yeah, Deaton's a tricky fighter. Maksum taking on Nam. A hard fight for Maksum to debut. I'm going with him in this one.
It is a difficult debut, but it's also a really good one, right? You're getting a guy who might not be a superstar, but like if you're a real MMA fan, the people who know Tyson Nam's a pretty good fighter, so getting a win over him in your debut is a very significant win.
All right, Matt. The next matchup, we have Elder versus Valdez. I'll go with Evan Elder in the fight.
I've also got Elder, but this should be a really fun matchup, an explosive one.
Lingo taking on Costa. Give me the Milkman.
Personally, I think this is going to be fight of the night. Like, genuinely look out for this fight because I think it's going to absolutely exceed expectations. I've also got Mel Costa.
Coming into the UFC, it was Mel Costa. It was Melquizael Costa. But the nickname was Melk. We're shortening it up. We're making it fun.
Melky Cabrera, guys.
I'm not going to curse, but what the foof is Melky Coffee?
I was
weird.
Curious about that too, yeah.
It's weird.
Not as good as Milk, you know?
Not a big fan of that one. Dudakova taking on Nunes. Let's go Nunes.
I've got Dudakova.
All right, next one. We have Lutz versus Bogdazarian. I got Bogdazarian.
I've also got Bogdazarian, but this could be another really fun fight.
McKinney, Sadikov. Sadikov?
I like Sadikov. If he gets hit by a big power shot, it's going to change this fight completely, but I still think his footwork's going to be good enough.
All right, Dumont versus Chandler. I don't have the fade in because I added it throughout the show. The super chat from 23 Break. Hafez sucks. Totally kidding.
Guys, I'm not
Keep
saying he
killing it,
sucks
fellas.
either. It's just, you get it. You don't become a ranked fighter just by signing your paper, right? Like, Michael Chandler got a main event when he came into the UFC, right? Or he fought Dan Hooker on a pay-per-view. He still wasn't a ranked fighter when he came in. Like, you need a body of work to justify that position.
I'm going to read it backwards and not get Michael Bisping. Cider Dixon saying, hi, Matt and Craig. I know what's up. Nice try. I've been fooled before. Albert Duraev taking on Jun Young Park. Split on this one. Give me Park.
I like Duraev in the matchup. I never thought in a million years I would have picked him in this fight, but the more that I started watching, I do think his top...
You picked him in all 3 fights he's had in the UFC.
But again, I thought Jun Young Park was a difficult matchup for him for all the reasons you said. He can do a lot of the same things that Duraev can with his offensive wrestling, but he is that much more dynamic on the feet. The difference is, I just think Duraev's going to be able to ground him out and kind of get rid of that part of Park's game.
All right, the Zaitsar taking on Prado. I think of that Fado song every time. I'm going with Otman as Zaitsar. I don't necessarily love it.
I've also got Otman in the matchup.
All right, Cool Banana Boys loving it. Then we got the co-main event, Della versus Hafez. Della is the pick here.
Hopefully Hafez can show us something. Like, I'm hoping for that, but I've got Della Maddalena.
Cider Dixon, I know what that is. I'm not saying it. All right, and then we got Holm versus Bueno Silva. 41-year-old former champ Holly Holm. 10th 5-round fight in the UFC. Let's do it up. One more time.
Bueno Silva has the opportunity of like Draymond Green when David Lee got hurt. David Lee was really good, if you guys remember, but he got hurt, and then Draymond took a spot, and the rest is history. Bueno Silva has a massive opportunity in this fight because she is getting an opportunity that really nobody would have thought that she'd be able to against someone like Holly Holm. If she wins, it changes everything. I still think Holm's going to get the win.
A classic front court of Andrew Bogut and Lee. Wow. Remember Andrew Bynum, too? There was a time, Matt.
He didn't have knees, unfortunately.
In this matchup, yeah, both of us going with Holly Holm. Now, people know next weekend it actually is, and no fooling, a really big card. I'll turn that one down. Tom Aspinall taking on Marcin Tybura in the main event. And this one, 15 total fights on the card. There's a lot of really big ones to get excited for. And if you do consider, we already talked about it, like Jacasey's taking on Joel Alvarez. There's a lot of debuts. Molly McCann, Yulia Stolyarenko co-main event. So if you thought that the co-main event this weekend was weird until they switched it to Della Hafez, Molly McCann, Yulia Stolyarenko. Who do you think they want to win in that?
Probably Molly, I'd imagine. Will there be any fake belts in the crowd for her to parade around, perhaps?
I don't know. We'll see how that one goes, but make sure you check that one out. We'll be taping that one tomorrow night. I've got most of the graphics done for it, so it should be a fun one to look forward to. You can always find us at Fight Night Picks for those polls that we're always talking about. And next week, I'm away, but when it comes to question mark kicks on Saturday, we'll figure out a way to do it. Maybe I'll wake up early and I'll do it from the hotel or something. We'll do it that way. So look forward to question mark kicks at a TBD type of time. The video on Monday for the Aspinall Tybura card. Thank you so much for tuning in. Toss us a like on your way out. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.